Shorekeeper, the former leader of the Black Shores and Rover's canon wife, is back at it again to save your roster and your sanity on her first rerun banner. And it's safe to say that she's even stronger than she was at release in version 1.3, with all of the new DPS and sub-DPS characters that have released since, with a simple-to-use playstyle, healing, and the best buffs in the game. As a Spectro, liberation damage-focused character that specializes in damage amplification and buffs to critical stats, pretty much every damage-oriented character in the game can get a ton of mileage out of her kit, and she remains the only real must-pull unit in the game. With that, welcome to our full-scope, comprehensive guide to Shorekeeper, the first and only premium 5-star support, and I'm here to break down everything when it comes to how she works, what her best equipment will be, and the steps you need to take across her team building and rotations to make the most out of her insane buffing potential. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Shorekeeper, with her baseline kit, focuses on generating concerto energy as fast as possible while activating her resonance liberation to provide massive damage amplification and buffs to critical rate and damage to her entire team, all while providing a moderate amount of burst healing and sustain over time. The faster her rotation is, the better her overall performance, and a good rotation requires the use of her Forte circuit. Shorekeeper has a 5-stack Forte circuit that, when filled, allows her to use a special heavy attack that pulls in all enemies and deals a small amount of damage. Every time Shorekeeper uses a basic attack, she generates 1 stack of her Forte circuit and creates a collapsed core, which turns into a flare star butterfly that tracks enemies and deals a small amount of damage. Using this enhanced heavy attack transforms all collapsed cores into those butterflies immediately. Shorekeeper's basic attack is a simple 4-hit attack chain that generates 1 stack of her Forte circuit when she uses stages 1, 2, or 4, while the third hit instead generates 2 stacks in exchange for a lengthy animation time. Using a dodge counter immediately attacks with the third hit of this attack chain. The third hit also has a small pulling effect in an AoE. Her heavy attack, on the other hand, causes her to transform into a butterfly, gradually consuming stamina while also collecting nearby resources, albeit in a very small AoE. While in butterfly form, she builds up 1 stack of her Forte every second and deals a small amount of damage after leaving the form. Her plunging attack causes her to quickly jump down onto an enemy, and clicking the attack button right after this attack allows her to chain into the second hit of her basic attack. A plunging attack can also be used to consume a full Forte circuit, having the same effects as her enhanced heavy attack, with no pulling effect. Shorekeeper's resident skill, on the other hand, simply heals all party members based off Shorekeeper's HP stat and also summons 5 dim star butterflies that attack enemies and generate concerto. This ability also allows Shorekeeper to chain into that second hit of her basic attack chain. It can also be used in the air if you want to. The last component of Shorekeeper's on-field kit is easily her most important, and that's her resonance liberation. This ability summons a large blue outer stellar realm that continuously heals party members based off her HP and upgrades to the purple inner stellar realm when any team member uses an intro skill, granting crit rate based off Shorekeeper's energy regeneration to the entire team, with a cap of 250 ER and 12.5% crit rate. When a second intro skill on the team is used, the inner stellar realm transforms into the gold supernal stellar realm, granting a crit damage based off ER that caps at the same 250% for 25% critical damage. This field lasts a whopping 30 seconds, and the ability has a cooldown of only 25. Shorekeeper will typically trigger the first intro skill on her team by building up her concerto bar, while the sub DPS like a Jeja or a Sanhua will trigger the second, allowing a Hypercarry character like Carlotta or Camellia to benefit from the full 12.5% crit rate and 25% critical damage buff across their rotation. While the Supernal or Gold Stellar Realm is active, using Shorekeeper's intro skill will activate a special cinematic attack, Discernment, that deals a massive amount of damage, heals the team, and ends the Stellar Realm. This ability is guaranteed to critically hit, deals resonance liberation damage, and scales with her HP. Shorekeeper's baseline intro skill, on the other hand, simply heals the team and summons 5 dim star butterflies that deal a small amount of damage. When Shorekeeper triggers that first intro skill, she'll also activate her own outro skill for the team, amplifying all attribute damage by 15% while also granting 5 stacks of a special buff that allows any member of the team to instantly recover from enemy hits and perform a dodge, allowing for a follow-up with a dodge counter. Both buffs last for 30 seconds or exactly as long as her Stellar Realm. When factoring in all of Shorekeeper's abilities, resources, and interactions with each other, she has a simple playstyle that involves the use of her resonance skill, basic attacks, and Forte enhanced heavy attacks to build up her concerto energy until she reaches around 65 to 75% of her gauge, before finishing off her rotation with a resonance liberation, echo skill, and then the activation of a teammate's intro skill. Her team will then cycle through their rotations, gradually upgrading the Stellar Realm and improving her buffs, and she'll cap off the rotation by consuming the third teammate's concerto gauge to activate Discernment and give her a head start on her next rotation. If you're casting Shorekeeper's resonance liberation too early in her rotation, the field can oftentimes times expire before her third teammate's Concerto gauge is ready, so you'll want to ensure that you're casting it right before Shorekeeper uses her outro skill. Her massive 12.5% crit rate and 25% critical damage buff make her one of the best characters in the game and greatly improve the power of units like Camellia, Havoc Rover, or Zhang Li Yao, who don't have crit rate nodes in their skill tree. When it comes to Shorekeeper's inherent skills, her first is a revive that will consume 50% of Shorekeeper's health to restore the same amount to the party member in danger. This has a cooldown of 10 minutes and cannot KO Shorekeeper. Her second inherent, on the other hand, increases her ER by 10% whenever any member of her team is inside the Stellar Realm, and she also improves Rover's ER by 10% simply while they're on Shorekeeper's team. That's why I said cat and wife. Shorekeeper's a character with the best buffs in the game and a respectable amount of personal damage, as long as you're timing the use of her Stellar Realm properly and making sure to utilize intro skills across your team's rotation. She's the easiest to use and gain the full benefits from when you're using her in traditional Hypercarry teams, as the order of outro skills from Shorekeeper to sub DPS to main DPS is very easy to follow, but she can still be used very well in dual DPS lineups with practice. When it comes to actually building Shorekeeper, starting off with her skill priority, there's only one actual ability you should max out to reach her full damage potential: her intro skill. This is because Discernment is the only real meaningful damage in her kit, scaling off HP, just like her healing. If you're looking for additional sustain, her Resonance Liberation and Resonance skill are the next two priorities, while her Forte Circuit and Basic Attack are the lowest on the list, as they both scale with her attack, which will oftentimes be very low in her optimal stat builds. I don't recommend leveling any of her abilities aside from her intro skill above level 6, and you should only invest in the healing bonus nodes on her skill tree or her Resonance Liberation and skill if you really need the extra healing to save on the weekly boss mats. Next up, let's talk about Shorekeeper's weapons. She's got two main viable options, but several others if you're willing to sacrifice her rotation time. Let's start off with her signature, Stellar Symphony. This weapon gives a whopping 77% ER, a moderate buff to HP, 8 Concerto energy whenever a liberation is used, and a 14% attack buff to the entire team when a resonance skill that heals the team is used for 30 seconds. This weapon will give Shorekeeper the best offensive buffs and personal damage possible while making Shorekeeper's 250% ER requirement in battle very easy to achieve, but might not be worth the steep cost of around 80 limited pulls. This is because A, an attack buff of 14% might look massive on paper, but it's essentially just 1.5 substats worth of attack, and B, a 4-star weapon called Variation exists. Let's talk about that one. Variation provides 52% ER, and perhaps most importantly, between 8 and 16 Concerto energy whenever a skill is used. At R0, Stellar Symphony is undeniably a better option, but with the ability to pull Variation from every banner in the game, players can reasonably expect to get at least a couple of sensitization ranks on it and generate more Concerto than Shorekeeper's signature. There's no content in the game that requires that 14% attack buff to clear, so you'll still get amazing results using Variation, and at R5, it can actually outperform her signature. These two weapons stand head and shoulders above the rest due to their ability to reduce Shorekeeper's rotation time and meet her ER requirements. And if Concerto and rotation time isn't a concern, she's got other viable options as well. The first is Call of the Abyss, a free option acquired in 2.0 Exploration that has the same ER as Variation and instead grants a 16 to 32% healing bonus for 15 seconds when using a liberation, increasing her sustain abilities. The second is a pure ER stat stick, Rectifier number 25, a craftable with the same 51% ER that provides either healing or an attack buff whenever a skill is used. It's okay if you have nothing else. Rectifier Voyager, a 3-star weapon, provides a very low 32% ER but has a passive effect that restores resonance energy whenever a skill is used. It should only be used as a last resort. Every other Rectifier is damage oriented and really shouldn't be considered at all. Now, it's time to move on to Shorekeeper's Echoes, and there's only one real option: Rejuvenating Glow with the Fallacy of No Return. For her Echo main stats, you'll want HP, healing bonus, or critical damage as the 4 cost, 1 ER 3 cost, and a spectral damage, HP, or ER second 3 cost, as well as 2 HP 1 costs. Your choice for her 4 and 3 costs will depend on the number of ER substats on your Echoes, as you'll want to reach a minimum of 230% ER on the stat page to trigger her full buffs in combat. This is because the Fallacy of No Return provides 10% ER on cast, and Shorekeeper gains 10% ER from her second inherent when her Stellar Realm is active. For the best survivability, you'll want HP or healing bonus, and for the most damage, you'll want critical damage and spectral damage. For her Echo substats, you'll want to prioritize as much ER as possible and as much critical damage, HP percent, resonance liberation damage, and flat HP as you can. Pretty much every other stat is completely useless on Shorekeeper, and ER is the most important stat to have, so try to ensure that each echo has at least one roll of it. The last area of investment when it comes to Shorekeeper involves your wallet or a lot of saved astrite. Her sequence nodes. Big thanks to Pridewind for calculating the damage increase per node, but do keep in mind a lot of it is dependent on her team. Shorekeeper's first copy is mainly a quality of life buff, extending the range of her Stellar Realm's effect by 50%, increasing its duration by 10 seconds, and allows her Stellar Realm to persist even after casting Discernment. This doesn't have any meaningful impact on her team's damage outside of some niche use cases in dual DPS compositions. Her second node, on the other hand, is Nuts. This grants her Resonance Liberation a massive 40% attack buff to the entire team, and is one of the biggest buffs to team damage in the game. Her third sequence node causes her Liberation to grant 20 additional Concerto energy, dramatically reducing her rotation time, while her fourth simply grants her a 70% healing bonus on a Resonance skill. Her fifth buffs the pulling effect on her third basic attack by 50% and her enhanced heavy by 30, and her sixth node, the big one, increases the damage multiplier of Discernment by 42% and grants Shorekeeper a whopping 500% critical damage on the ability. You can consider running a Spectro damage set like Celestial Light if you're willing to go this far. Now that we've covered Shorekeeper's build, let's get into some of her teams and optimal rotations. I'll be honest here, she's really good in pretty much every single composition in the game, be it Hypercarry or dual DPS, but she's the easiest to get the full mileage from in Hypercarry teams, so we'll cover those first. These teams will consist of a sub DPS like Sanhua, Mortefi, or Jeja, alongside a main DPS like Camellia, Jian, or Carlotta. The one Hypercarry team that Shorekeeper might not be best in slot for is Jinsei, where Varina's coordinated attacks can outweigh Shorekeeper's heavy critical buffs. In these teams, Shorekeeper will start off the team's rotation by casting a Resonance skill, advancing to the second stage of her basic attack, and then continually use basic attacks until her Forte circuit is filled, before using an enhanced heavy attack, and then, well, more basics until her Forte circuit is filled again before casting her heavy attack again. You'll repeat this over and over again until Shorekeeper reaches 60 to 75% of her Concerto gauge, and then activate her Echo skill and Resonance Liberation to fully top off that gauge, and then intro skill onto a sub DPS before going through their rotation before intro skilling onto your main DPS. Once your main DPS's rotation is complete and their Concerto is filled, you'll go ahead and intro skill onto Shorekeeper and use Discernment, nuking the enemy, ending the Stellar Realm, and granting a nice boost to Concerto to streamline her second rotation. When paired with weapons like Variation or Stellar Symphony, you'll need much less basic attacks and Forte enhanced heavy attacks to fill up her gauge, and in turn, increase the team's overall DPS. When using Shorekeeper in dual DPS lineups, on the other hand, it's much more important to constantly swap to a second character during Shorekeeper's rotation to build up their Concerto alongside Shorekeeper's, only activating the Stellar Realm when a DPS unit is very close to a full Concerto bar. This is because main DPS characters generate Concerto much more slowly than sub DPS ones in exchange for more on-field damage. This means you might cast abilities like Chang Li or Brandt's Resonance Liberation at the start of the team's rotation, rather than with all of the team's buffs active to get a head start in their generation. Each dual DPS rotation is incredibly unique and requires experimentation to get the best results, so they won't be covered in this guide. So feel free to explore other channels on YouTube for advanced gameplay clips featuring these characters. Now that we've talked about Shorekeeper's team rotations, let's talk about some of her more advanced mechanics. Shorekeeper requires constant use of her basic attacks to generate her Forte circuit, and her third basic attack generates 2 stacks across a lengthy animation. This means you can swap cancel it with another member of her team, usually the sub DPS, and perform an attack or skill before swapping back to Shorekeeper with almost no loss in rotation time, streamlining the team's overall performance. Additionally, while at a full Forte circuit, you can also perform a plunge attack to consume her Forte circuit instead of a heavy attack, and immediately advance her basic attack chain to stage 2 and reach that third attack even faster. However, keep in mind that these are complex but relatively low impact optimizations that'll only save you a couple of seconds in your clear, so keep them in mind if you're willing to get a bit sweaty with her, but don't make it too much of a priority, as she'll still have fantastic performance regardless of how you're using her. And don't forget that dodges and dodge counters generate a huge amount of Concerto, so when facing aggressive enemies, use them as often as possible and even consider running into enemy attacks to streamline your rotation even further. As a final note, in Whimpering Wastes, you might find it more beneficial to slot over 250% ER on her when utilizing her in the first stage of the game mode, as you'll start off with no resonance energy and will need to build up to 100% across the clear. At the end of the day, Shorekeeper is one of the most powerful units in the game, not because of her personal damage, but because of her insane buffing potential. And once you figure out how her kit works, she becomes one of the easiest to use units in the game, with her main drawback being her extended rotation time compared to other sustains like Varina. However, her incredibly powerful buffs and her ability ability to make up for crit rate substats in your DPS's builds makes her one of the best pulls for any account, regardless of where it might be in the game. There's a reason why she's considered the only must-pull unit in the game, and she's withstood the test of time considering her release in only version 1.3. However, don't feel the pressure to pull her if you feel like you're already meeting your sustain needs with units like Verena, Baija, Brand, or Cantarella. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.